So fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to get started, and it's really a great pleasure to have the opportunity to share today with you all around the very pressing challenge of AI and leadership and how to build cohesion in times of rapid change. So welcome. Please pop your questions and comments on the chat as we go. And the way that we're going to run this is Sona and I are going to have a jolly good conversation. And then along the way, if you have questions, please let us know. So let me introduce Sona. She is a incredible human being and a C-suite strategist. She's just very recently become a TEDx speaker, so congratulations for that. She's a much loved collaborator with Ginger, and on top of that, she's an author. And she served as a chief commercial officer and in senior leadership roles across Fortune 300 and private equity-backed organizations, driving huge revenue growth across 400 products, $1 billion in sales quotas and go-to-market transformation. So a hugely impressive human. Now she works with leaders, private equity firms and their portfolio companies on the human dynamics that drive or derail commercial acceleration, enterprise value, and the rollout of AI. So how do leaders maintain cohesion, trust, and decision clarity during high-speed change is your specialism. Hi, Sona.
Hi, Sarah. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice. And just to frame the conversation today, we're all aware that this is a time of huge, rapid change across the world. And the way I like to look at it is it's as if we are on one of those team building activities together. We're raft building, except instead of having time on the sides of the bank, we're all in the middle of the rapids, bringing all of our bits to try and piece together a raft. You know, you've got operations bringing some planks and some barrels and some rope. You've got tech who've got an engine. You've got the legal team with their life jackets. Maybe you've got marketing trying to paint the thing before we're constructing it. And maybe sales are even bringing a customer along, trying to get them on before this thing is being built. So we're trying to piece together something cohesive in the context of AI change. And at the same time, we don't know quite where the river is taking us. Are we heading towards a waterfall or some sunny uplands? Is that how you see it, Sona? What do you see in this time?
No, I think that is really well articulated. I especially love the example. It's incredibly visual. And as you were describing it, I felt things happening in my body. Which is what I suspect teams are feeling and leaders are feeling, right? There's a little bit of anxiety, there's fear, there's uncertainty. I think I am aligned with your perspective. I think what I would like to reinforce is that the way I define cohesion is really it's shared clarity, it's trust, and it's alignment in action, especially during times of pressure. And I think without cohesion, speed essentially becomes chaos. If we agree that that's really sort of one of the fundamental problems or manifestations of AI arrival in our workforces, leaders are being asked, I think, to communicate differently, decide differently, and most importantly, they are being asked to create clarity without certainty. And so I think we just need better leadership systems around it, right? And obviously we'll get into kind of what can leaders do differently, but yes, that is the world that leaders are walking into today.
One of a lot of change and a lot of fragmentation and a new skill set required to hold everything together. Is this a different time or is this just another reorg?
So I would say yes and no. I would say it is definitely like other transformations in the sense that every transformation will create change, uncertainty, and resistance, right? That's a very fundamental human reaction to something different. I think what's unique about the AI evolution is really the speed and the unevenness with which this change is coming. And so in the past, we could orchestrate change across organizations, right, in a very sequential manner. Like strategy was defined, it got rolled out, you then communicated with teams. And I think what's happening now is I call it asymmetric change, right? Different strategy is being rolled out. I think teams are adopting, interpreting it in very different manners. They are executing on it in very different definitions, and that's becoming really clear. And this is all happening at the same time. And I think that's what feels so disruptive and so unsettling about the world we exist in today.
Yeah, there's wave upon wave of change, and it can feel very daunting, particularly for non-technical experts who are not at the forefront of these changes to keep up. I just had a new car delivered yesterday, and I'm pleased to say it's not a Tesla because when my husband's Tesla was delivered and I drove it for the first time, I came back in tears because there were no buttons. The car was threatening me the whole way to and from the school run. And I felt like I haven't requested the changes that this non-car car had some sort of imposed on me. Today, my lovely new Skoda, I could get in it, first time driving it, drove to and from dropping my kids off somewhere, and I came back feeling that it was something that I understood. So it sort of gave me an insight into the pressures and challenges of things changing so much when we have other things to do. You know, we have the kids to drop off, or we have the team to keep aligned, we have the sales to win. So yeah, the combination of change compounding upon change is a real pressure for people.
It is incredible. I think AI is going to keep evolving. I think, and this is what I hear from a lot of leaders that I work with who feel like they have a really good AI strategy that they believe has been well communicated and well rolled out, but they aren't seeing the adoption at the even paces, right? In fact, we're not even seeing the ROI of AI adoption. And I think what I'm beginning to see, the theme that's emerging really is organizations that are going to win in this world for the next, I'd say, very short 6, 12, 18 months aren't those who sort of move fastest in pockets, but it's going to be the organizations who move together. And that's really where leadership, I think, becomes incredibly important and even more important than it has been in the past. So yeah, it's a fascinating world that we show up to every day.
Yeah. Considered change together rather than running at something for a fear of missing out. Let's unpack what's different about the AI revolution. And Sona and I have put together for you some resources, which we'll happily share in the LinkedIn thread later. If I can get my screen share working, here we go. So, what's different about now versus any other kind of change? Well, three things along the left-hand side, and then I'll ask Sona to unpack what we can do about that or what we need to be aware of. So what's different is clearly the pace of change. Things are seemingly speeding up exponentially. Uncertainty, we don't know if those things like we're heading, are we heading for the waterfall or somewhere else? We don't know where these things are likely to take us. We don't know the impact on humanity. We don't know the impact on our organizational structures. We also have other types of uncertainty, of course, political, economic, hugely uncertain times from many different directions. And then at the same time, there's this scale of opportunity, the possibility, the gold rush effect of AI. That if I'm able just to get that rich seam, then there could be a disproportionate wealth of opportunities heading towards me and my organization versus the alternative, which is that someone else might take all of my opportunity, literally as an employee or as an organization over time. And that's where people versus tech clashes could be seen like not quite before. Historically, perhaps technology has been a little bit more aligned with or in partnership with people as the horse and cart turned into a car. We all got there faster. As that then turned into mass production, we got there cheaper. Is it still the case that AI is pro people, or are there actually some situations that we're seeing now where people and tech are at odds with each other? So, Sona, lots to unpack there. Shall we have a look first of all in terms of
Yes.
cohesion, drawing together people and teams effectively in organizations? How do we respond to each of these different pressures that are unique to the AI revolution?
Sure, perfect. So here's what great starts to look like in organizations that are figuring this out and honestly, right, have figured it out. I'd say the whole definition of culture driving togetherness versus virtual islands. So I talked about this where AI is everybody feels compelled to react. What we are not doing in a very cohesive manner is actually responding in a very thoughtful, unified fashion. And so you get the reactions at the individual levels, and it makes complete sense, right? Like we are hearing different messages, different expectations. We're experimenting in teams in pockets. And underlying all of that is the fundamental question, what does this mean for me? Because this is redefining your concept of self-worth, your job, your career, your earning potential, job security. And again, as companies work through this, it's really incredible that culture now gets defined as how well can we do this together, which requires shared context, shared interpretation, shared execution. And so I think that will be incredible to just stay on track with the pace of change that's coming our way.
And that
Um,
means a lot of
yeah.
communication, right? Not just every once in a while. It means that do we have to change our patterns of how we work together?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what I will say is communication, I think, and communication, the execution of solid communication plans, I think used to be incredibly important to organizations, and there were organizations who did it well. I would actually push us a bit further and say that in this new world, communication actually becomes the operating system that gets us through this massive and highly disruptive human and business transformation.
Yeah, and we'll look at that in some more detail later on. But of course, there's also something here around the way that we feel together in this change, like the drawing together of a sense of psychological safety. When we have any psychological safety in a time of such uncertainty?
Yes, and those are things businesses have historically not either addressed or been uncomfortable to address, right? And so I think AI is, we've always had, I'd say, corporate dysfunction. I think AI is just shining the light because things need to happen and they need to happen so quickly. So, yes, completely agree.
Right. If there was a crack before, that crack is going to be amplified. And one of my favorite phrases is, are we actually doing things smartly, or are we just doing
Yes.
stupid things quicker as a result of AI? What about cohesion in terms of uncertainty? There's something here around if we're going to draw together as teams and organizations, it's not just about the tools, is it? It's not just about implementing rapidly. It's about understanding what are the underlying principles that sit underneath AI. Like, do we actually understand what it's for, what it is? How was it designed in order that we can understand what, therefore, are we going to use it for?
Absolutely. I think this is what's interesting is, and leaders, I think, are being asked to create clarity without the certainty. And I think what's unique about the time we're in is we don't have all the answers, right? And if we have an answer for today, it's likely going to change within the next 24, 48 hours. But I think aligning on what is known, what's expected, right? What is evolving? I think even stacking hands on that articulation, either at team levels, leadership levels, C-suite, board levels, I think has become incredibly important. The other piece I would say that just defining what are the rules of engagement in this new world. So when do we rely on AI versus human judgment, right? What is the level of validation? We are all being asked to use AI, but is it replacing tasks? Is it replacing roles? What does this mean? And who makes the final call, right, on when we use the tools, as you talked about? And so I think that all of this becomes the underlying principles really become about reframing not just adoption, but aligned action.
Yeah, and in essence, we don't know, and yet we're going to have to take our best
Yes.
possible guess for the moment that we have. Yeah, then when we think about the scale of opportunity, that say something there about grappling with trade-offs together. It's not enough anymore just to be the one expert in the room who figures it all out, right? We have to share and distribute our intelligence, lean into the hive mind or distributed
Yeah.
cognition rather than sitting as that expert. No individual has an answer on their own, do they?
No individual has an answer. And again, this is going to shine the light on our ability to collaborate. in trusted environments, right? And I loved the dialogue that you and Eduardo were having on LinkedIn around the hive mind, because I think this is where, and Jeff talks about pathfinding pathfinders, right? I think this is really where we're going to have to figure out collectively and individually what matters, right? What are our values? What's true? What are the facts that we are operating with versus what do we not know? And then I'd say finally, like, how do we act, right? So, what is the method? How do we uniquely go to market? I think skill sets across the team, there will be folks who will be the experts in AI. How do you leverage their skill sets? How do you enhance, right, to raise levels of performance for the entire team, in addition to running your day-to-day functions, maintain the business, like you said, achieve sales targets. I think it's really going to be about the shared understanding and shared delivery, which will help us make it through this very transformative time.
Yeah, sure. And there's something there around again the communication. So if we look at those who are really brilliant at trying tech out, we have a few of them in our team. We see them in the world around us. Incredible things are possible in a short space of time through vibe coding, through using LLMs in a really effective way, particularly when we get agents on board. Now, I know very little about that. It's not my particular field to sit and experiment with AI, but we have some great people in the team who do. So we've got to make sure that we listen into what is it that's working and how we can get on board. In terms of the simplest possible things that we can do to take advantage of the AI. Without that, we just have some individuals who are shooting off into the distance, but not necessarily doing it in a way that benefits the whole system. And actually here with AI, in particular with agential AI, we start seeing that these tools have to work across the whole structure of an organization. They have to be woven in because they work so fast and so effectively when they are. But when they're not woven in, they can be extremely time consuming to develop and confusing to deploy.
And often unreliable. So.
Right. Yeah. I think some of the latest studies looking at the accuracy of LLMs to be able to take a piece of information literally from a report and translate that across into a summary. The best models come out at 77% accurate. And you're like, where's the other 25%? Some of them, the less good ones are at sort of 60% accuracy. So you think, wow, okay, where's that 25 to 40% accuracy? And which bit? Which bit is accurate? And how do you know? There are ways, of course, of making it more accurate, but we don't know what we don't know. So we have to really, really lean into the whole hive mind together. I think we've made that point. Okay, let's have a look at capability. What do leaders need to model in this time, Sona, in order to be really effective guiders of change, in the rapids?
So I think this is why this is so hard for the humans involved, right? We're being asked to do things that we inherently aren't very good at doing, right? Some of us have, I think, done more work on it than others, but in general, there's a level of stress, there's a level of uncertainty in any corporate environment, right? In this current world where there is so much pressure to drive results, you have AI, you have change. What leaders and I think just individuals are being asked to do is, right, lean into their human judgment, show up as a stable professional, stay calm, right, leverage your decision-making skills, all while there is this tornado swirling around you, which could impact your longevity, your team's longevity. And this, I think, is an incredibly difficult human ask because we, in most organizations, have not created cultures of safety and trust, right? Where we can't often raise our hands. And so I think this is a really difficult ask because very often in the work that I do with portfolio companies, leaders are basically saying very often we don't know, we don't understand, or we don't know what to do. Right. And we don't know who is going to make the call. So they are sort of getting a top down rollout of a strategy and then they are being held accountable to execute, to roll out. But yet there's this layer of missed information, which is sort of showing up. And yet we need them to show up as stable, calm cool, collected individuals, which is just very difficult. And it's an unfair ask. So.
It is. We need to get way better at dealing with uncertainty and not knowing. And actually, shout out to Stephen D'Souza, who is a friend of mine who's written books on this subject, a trilogy of books on not knowing. Maybe we'll put the link in afterwards. Really impressive, powerful books. And there's more required then of leaders than just the square left brain style, get it done. It's not enough just to push harder. We have to become wiser as well. Jeffrey Snover, who you mentioned just before, a good friend of Ginger's, he says that we're all going to have to become, well, we're actually going to need to recruit philosophers rather than, technical specialists. And in our own analysis, we're just working on a model of leadership for AI that I love everyone to input into. So if you're listening and have some thoughts on that, then let me know. But our estimate is that the skill set, the capability set for leaders is maybe 10% technical. You need to be 10% like a tech bro, thinking and understanding the language, the definitions, getting really up to speed on AI, fluency and literacy. So the literacy being the way in which you understand the terms, the fluency being the way in which you use them. 10% is something about that. 10% only. This is not a technical change in its primary form, because the technology is so accessible if we just have a small chunk of expertise surrounding it. So what's the other 90%? Maybe it's about 40% philosopher, I think, the ability to think really clearly, critical thinking, ethical thinking, the ability to look forward in time and make predictions, spot patterns, and spot which is the information that is correct, which is the information that's incorrect. And then the 50% that's left, I would put forward would be the business owner. Like for our organizations to function and for AI to embed itself, it needs to be highly contextually valid. It really needs to sit within what is working as a business already. We need to understand and discern what can be outsourced quickly to AI. And we need to really, really closely understand, what does success look like in this business and why do we need AI, as opposed to just having a fear of missing out and chasing after it. Anything to contribute to that, Sona?
No, I think you're spot on.
Nice. Yeah. So then what else have we got here? Capability, scale of opportunity. I suppose we've just pointed to some of this. Decision clarity within complete data, I think we've kind of already mentioned. And role modeling these behaviors. Can we role model slowing things down and thinking about, rather than just chasing through, when everybody around us is encouraging us to go faster, and when so many of us are doing this with less resource because there have been constant rounds of trimming and reorgs. How do you manage in such a moment?
I think this is really, so first of all, I will acknowledge how difficult this is. And having worked in large organizations and in private equity owned companies, the pressure and fear is real. I think what's incredibly important is to actually hit pause. And the way you do that perhaps is by asking some simple questions, right? I think there's ways to sort of stop, I'll call the madness at times, and just ask a few clarification questions. Two things I will say that are important. I have empathy for leaders, because leaders very often are recipients of this change, right? And so very often they are not designing the AI strategy, but they are receiving it and then held responsible for rolling it out. So I think they are interpreting it to the best of their knowledge. So I think that's one level of acknowledgement, which I think is a new requirement of leadership. They have always required, but this is just different. The magnitude and pace is incredibly different. But I think there's definitely questions that could be asked, and we'll get into some practical tips, I know, around how teams can sort of slow things down. But I think it does require humans, professionals, leaders to step up, be a little bit more courageous, right? Be willing to hit pause, because you might be the one articulating something that I think everybody in the room is feeling, and asking a few thoughtful questions that will actually help the effective rollout of this. And so I think it's going to require us to invest in our personal development, our personal growth, right? Lean into attributes that perhaps we have not invested in. And then we talk about, right, how do you show up more courageously? How do you show up with your human brilliance, right? It's all the work that Ginger does. I think that becomes even more important as things speed up.
Great. And just before we go on, because we'll talk some more about that in a second in terms of communication, you posted something really cool. I think it was yesterday or today, or maybe a couple of days ago, around trust and the fracturing of the AI experience causing a fracturing, or maybe it's already been happening, of trust within the corporate world, within businesses in general. Can you say a little bit more about that? Connect the threads.
Yeah, so I think so for example, I recently large publicly traded company held an offsite for, and I got kind of pulled in at the tail end of this, but they held an offsite for their top 100 leaders. And in essence, I'm sort of paraphrasing here and taking some creative liberties, but essentially the message that was delivered to leadership was you have 6 months to get on the AI revolution. Um, or you need to start thinking about, right, the next phase. It was quite a clear, quite a harsh message. And I think what was amazing was the level of confusion and chaos that actually called, that brought to the surface because leadership teams didn't know how to understand that, how to interpret that, because they didn't feel like they had, so they were going in with this assumption of fractured trust, right? We're going to get some big news. My job might be in jeopardy. Right? They've gone through multiple rounds of layoffs in the US here. And then they walk in to deliver that message. And I think the impact of that message built on the lack of trust and completely, to a really great extent, I'd say derailed the next 30 days of activity, momentum, and progress. And so I think what becomes really important is we have to hit pause. So the organizations that will do this successfully, or even are doing it successfully, have learned to hit pause and go back to the very simple human needs of transparency, clarity, right? Communication, because this moment in time requires deeper trust before you can go do something as foundationally different. Because you're asking people to show up very differently. You're asking people to do things very differently. And I would say trust, again, I would say it's not something in organizations we have spent a lot of time directly talking about. Some of the more enlightened organizations are now talking about it. But yeah, I would say AI is just shining a light on something that was probably already fractured.
Yeah, so there's a real interplay between the way leaders behave and the way in which we're building cohesion with their organizations. And then, of course, let's have a look at the lines of communication across our teams and organizations and what we can do there to make sure that we keep up with this very particular change. So yeah, perhaps we start here with that pace of change. It's not just a one-off occurrence from top down to put forward your strategy, is it?
It is not. I think what the behaviors, I think this is what I will underlie in this whole category of communication. I think what teams are feeling and doing, right, is there's uneven adoption. There is inconsistent expectation. There's silent tension, right? Because very few folks are willing to sort of raise their hand and call it. And very often we're seeing duplicative work, right? So AI is doing something, humans are doing something, and the behaviors that all of this is manifesting itself in there's things like hesitation, right? You have teams who are over relying on AI versus teams who are completely avoiding it and hoping that they can sort of push that impending doom. There's no shared understanding anymore of what this means. And then I'd say the last is there's this trend I'm noticing in the work that I do around what I'll call escalation overload. And it's not because leaders are getting pulled into more decisions that in prior days their teams would have been able to handle. And it's really because it's not that people are no longer incompetent, people just don't feel confident, right, in the decision criteria. And I think this is why communication, um, being willing to be transparent about the role that AI will be playing in organizations, Is it replacing tasks? Is it replacing workflows? Is it replacing people? What do you require people to do differently, right? Giving people the support in terms of the capabilities, the attributes, the skills that people need to invest in. I think this is why this category is particularly near and dear to my heart, because I think this will be where companies can either help make it or really struggle through it. So
But
I'm
there's
going
on
to
the
pause.
one hand that there's a need to over communicate in the sense that we've got lots of change happening and there needs to be a more regular cadence of communication. And on the other hand, we're hearing from team members, stop it, there's too much information. I can't cope with all these meetings. I can't cope with all these serious and important urgent messages and a tendency to switch off. So what I notice is the great leaders who are really navigating this effectively are brilliant narrative weavers. And by that, I mean that they're able to make sense of the change that's happening now and where we are proactively wishing to direct that change. And they're able to do that in an extremely simple way that the great communicators of these times actually take advice from or inspiration from bite-sized social media style communication. Not to say that it needs to be all sort of psychedelic and in your face, but it does need to be the minimum amount of information that has the maximum amount of impact. I call that a wedge communication. Like, how do we get in there to the smallest bit of information, the first bit of information that people need to know, and then scale it out in a way that makes sense rather than just vomiting information as a lot of leaders do. Too much information, too much all at once.
Yeah, I love the why that you have on here because I think there is so much noise in the marketplace about AI tools, AI-led companies. I think communication needs the slight shift that needs to happen, I think, is more meaningful communication and more real communication. I think we've stayed at the rational, logical level of communicating, and I think there's an opportunity to sort of tap into the more authentic level of communication. And I would actually be really curious, Sarah, on your perspective, when you've seen or heard of organizations who are struggling with this, right? Where do you see communications breaking down first?
Well, where it shows up, I'm not sure, but for sure, the most critical place is a leader within their own brains. Are they able to be coherent to themselves? Have they, if you ask them to say it out loud, do they know what it is that they're looking for? And here, again, name check to the fabulous Jeffrey Snover. You and I, Sona, have spent some time with him recently, and what he spent 30 or so years at Microsoft and became a technical fellow, which means he's one down from Satya Nadella, the CEO. And he said that Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, had one thing that he needed everybody to do within the team to be as he put it, intellectually honest. He said that you need to have a plausible theory of success. What you're doing, you need a hypothesis of what is going to work. You don't know the answer, but you need to have the hypothesis, and then you need to allocate resources effectively. So it's when you don't have that plausible theory of success clearly articulated, or you've got maybe loads of different competing hypotheses. That's when I see communication failing to get started before it even goes anywhere, and that's where we can see huge communication disconnect. So that could be C-suite level, or it could be, I also see this within change champions surrounding AI. I've seen a few organizations recently, let's say legacy industries, potentially struggling with their business model disappearing within the next 3 to 5 years. That's what they have said out loud to me. And yet, you've got the tech champion sitting somewhere in the organization, finding it very difficult to get change started because they are one of only a few people who have had the aha moment that there is such a threat. And if I look at that person, I think you know something that your team do not know yet. Why is it that you're sitting and waiting when you've just said you've got 3 to 5 years before your whole business model might be upended? Why are you waiting politely for cohesion to emerge? Why are you not grabbing people and shaking them? probably the answer to them to that question is that there's so little time that people won't pay attention. But what I'd say in return to that is that they've got to, if you're in a position where you have an insight about your organization and no one else is hearing, it's your job to make that case and to make it in an emotional, visceral way that people will pay attention to.
Love that.
Let's head into this thought, and I suppose this wraps this piece up. Sona, do you want to pick up on that? So cohesion is behavioral, not rhetorical.
Yeah, I think this is where I will just say it comes down to the humans below. It's the human systems below all of this, right? And I think we need to just acknowledge that that's true. I love that the transparency of communication comment leading to more trust got kind of highlighted because I think that's exactly what it is. I think um, we need clarity. It's all the foundational elements that we have, I think, gotten by without over the last few decades. And I think we are now being, this is sort of the this is the big reveal of organizations who can actually get the humans they employ to row in the same direction, as you said, while they are building the boat, right? I think this will be the great human test.
Gosh, collaboration is such a challenge. Let's give you one more visual, and then maybe we have a chance for a couple of questions. This is really how important we see leadership communications as that. This is what Ginger do professionally, helping leadership communications to connect all of this together, the strategy, the tech, the people, the culture, the sales, the governance, everything has to come together with a really solid hub to the spokes of this wheel. Why? Because the quicker this wheel turns, the more likely it is to fall to pieces unless there's something that glues it together. So, Sona, what would you say are your kind of couple of tips to help people to get either get clearer on what are their communication gaps, or to start to glue their organization together and create greater cohesion?
Sure. And I'm a very practical person, so I think the tips are going to sound incredibly simple, but trust me that they are impactful and we've seen them work. I think the first thing I will tell teams as they are looking at the enormity of the change, the volume of work that could be done, and the depth of transformation that's required, keep encouraging teams to say, let's narrow the focus, right? So instead of asking the question that I find a lot of companies asking, where can we use AI? I think the real question perhaps is, where does alignment matter most in our business right now? Right? Let that be the driving question because I think then you can engage AI to help you there. You can engage AI to actually accelerate and drive some of the results you really need for longevity. I think another thing teams could, as they look at this wheel, and I think of all the things they have to do, is start asking questions like, where are we experimenting versus what are we committing to? And you will be surprised at the variety of answers you get. But I think aligning on that answer, right? Agreeing on that answer for the next 30 days, for the next 60 days will drive tremendous peace and a little bit more calm in what feels like a pretty chaotic environment. And then I think there's things like understanding instead of picking 10 use cases, right? So if you're in an organization that is relatively new to this, still figuring out how to do this, one thing I see a lot of companies do is they will quickly identify 10 use cases that they are going to work on rollout. And I would say less is more. Pick one use case, right? Pick one area in your organization where you know the work is repeatable, you know the impact is measurable, and it's an initiative where you've got multiple teams or people involved, right? And sort of ring fence that. So simplify and focus. And then I'd say the last thing as teams are thinking through this, what I would say is let's collectively define what good looks like right now, because that definition is going to change as we all learn. But I think before introducing AI tools, right, just talk about what success looks like. Where is AI going to be used versus where are we not going to be using it, right? And then clearly articulate decisions where you still need the human judgment, versus AI tools, right? And aligning on those types of questions will feel really simple, but they can be profound in terms of the clarity and the impact they drive.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to give one little bonus piece of content here just now. And what I would also say is questions on the chat just now, because we will have a couple of moments at the end to answer. I think what you've said, or picking up on certain aspects of what you've said here, is that a lot of what we're doing right now is putting the horse in front of the cart rather than the other way around. That, we're focusing on the tools, the strategy is coming afterwards, perhaps, and principles, if they're ever discussed, are not front and center. And what we want to do instead is really start off by asking ourselves, as change occurs rapidly, what remains constant? Like, if we can't deal with all the change on a daily basis, what principles do we have here? For instance, who are we being whilst this change is happening? Are we putting people at the heart of this conversation, or are we putting cost cutting and AI, and why? And that's a choice to make. So what are the principles that we're using to engage AI? When are we using human judgment versus when are we using the incredible superpower of the principles? Sorry, the human brain. Then we've got strategy comes from the principles. When we know what AI is, what it does, what is our plausible theory of success? What resources will we assign as a result? And we can do this on a whole organizational level. What is the theory of success for a whole organization is basically its business case. What is it doing in the market, and why, and for whom? But what are we contributing to that? We had this conversation internally within the Ginger team, and we were all looking at if I'm working on sales, and I think that that we need to meet more people in order to increase the presence of what we do. What is my assumption about AI? Is that going to help me to identify more people, or do I need to take a different hypothesis? And how will we then measure success? Because if the thing that we are assuming is likely to happen, if our hypothesis becomes untrue, when will we know, and what will we switch to afterwards? So that's where we put the strategy after the principles, and then therefore, as a result of the strategy, which tools might we need to get us there? Okay, so as I say, if there are questions, pop them in the chat just now. I think in summary from our side, well, Sona, do you want to do this bit?
No, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'll do this bit. What we're finding, I suppose, is that this isn't primarily a tech challenge. AI, sure, is a technology, but the cohesion and the leadership surrounding it are what's going to make a big difference to the organizations that succeed, or the organizations that do not indeed succeed. So that would be our premise here. And good luck to everyone in the experience of having a go. And let's all hope that we survive the next 3 to 5 years, and are able to come out of it in a way that is, positive, and probably quite surprising in the way that things have developed. We've got some couple of comments coming in on the chat already. We've got Vicky, who's saying to us, or spotting transparency of communication means more trust, and leadership challenge, and built around a culture and trust. Any more to say there, Sona, on that building of culture and trust? What are the elements that we are missing there, perhaps, that we need to highlight?
I think I keep coming back to we are forgetting about the human systems that can either accelerate this effort or actually derail the effort, right? Because we are seeing a lot of companies who are investing in AI tools, are doing all the right things, and then not seeing the impact when it comes to results and ROI. And I think that's a conversation that is starting, but it's going to become more front and center. And so I keep coming back to it's really important. We've sort of lost sight of the human involved. And I think, yes, this is about AI, this is about all these amazing things. But I think recentering our conversations around the humans that are being impacted in a very, very primal way, and starting with that, and then building a culture of communication and trust, right? I think is really critical, because we will need humans, right? I think we will just need humans to do different things. And I think as humans, it is our responsibility to take ownership for our careers and lean into this, right? Let's explore, let's be curious about what we could be doing with AI as individuals, as professionals. But I think coming back to the human and then connecting the human systems to really the business systems are what I come back to.
Yeah, and the sheer amount of time that we don't have that we're going to have to carve out to make that happen is probably what I would highlight. That without the gift of time, we can't do our best quality thinking. We've got a few questions coming in just now, and what I'd say is we'll just say a couple of closing words, and then those who would like to stay on with more questions, then you can, because I know this was supposed to be 45 minutes. Just a couple of words on continuing the conversation. Sona, the brilliant Sona, is available and works with Ginger to deliver AI executive briefings and to work at that C-suite level to help unpack some of these cohesion and communication challenges. We also have leadership tables roughly monthly where we're digging more deeply in very small groups. So if you're a senior leader and would like to learn more about them, they're completely free, but extremely valuable in terms of the knowledge share, right, Sona? Really, really stimulating spaces. And coming soon in Planet Ginger is an AI for Leaders program. We're working on what does that look like? What is the model? And I'd really value any conversations and connections surrounding that. You know, what would you like to see in a program that unpacks some of these themes and helps turn it into something scalable for leaders, non-technical leaders, particularly grappling with this huge change. So if you need to disappear now because we're at time, please do. But we'll answer these couple of questions before we go. So Sandra, great question here. Have you seen any companies successfully managing this transformation in a human-centered way? Sona.
Um, so I would say it varies, and I think this is definitely something would love to connect with offline because I think when you look at large publicly traded companies versus startups versus right private equity owned or VC backed, there's definitely themes emerging in terms of how successfully AI is being adopted and rolled out. So there's nuances there. I think what I will say is that I have not seen an organization collectively navigate this successfully, but optimistically, I am seeing pockets within those organizations do it. And that's the work I'm leaning into researching is what is it about those teams and the human dynamics that are making that successful?
Yeah, because often human is versus AI. One very impressive AI forward organization that I was hearing from last week were at the same time as saying what incredible growth they were having, was sort of semi boasting about the fact that they'd shifted their headcount from more than 100 to just 40 people. So you think, wow, okay, on a business level, great success. On a human level, a disaster for employment. So I think this is something that we all have to work together on to think, well, where is, because of course it has to be commercially competitive. And are we just simply undercutting the value of humans without necessarily paying for all the costs in terms of energy and IP that AI has brought to the surface? I don't know the answer to the question. And I think if anyone has specific examples of companies that are managing this really well, we should definitely amplify them. Final question, and then we'll wrap up. From Joanne, a lot of this debate around the approach is this replacing roles, tasks, workflows. In terms of trust and transparency, we may not know the roles questions at the outset. Any tips on how we continue to build trust and transparency without just reinforcing that fear in the unknown? I mean, I'll jump in and say we've got to be honest, haven't we? I don't think it helps massively to say that some companies saying we've got 25 AI employees. No, you haven't. You've got a tool. It's not a human being. It's a tool. And that if it is an employee, it probably is just a euphemism for job cuts. So first of all, if leaders in organizations are willing to be truthful and transparent about what's going on and why, I think everybody finds it much easier to cope. What would you add, Sona?
I think I would add there's a realization that I think in this new world, right? I think communications does become the operating system. It does become your unique currency, which will determine if you can make it through. When there is clarity, I think the one of the misconceptions seem to be that at certain levels of leadership that people don't stop working, right? What people start doing is doing more, but they start doing it in different directions. Right? I think this is why output has sort of mag is exponentially growing, but there isn't alignment. And so I think what I would come back to is the communication needs to not just support execution, which is what communication at one time used to be leveraged for. I think in this particular instance, a strong communication and honest communication strategy, right? A rather real and open communication strategy will actually determine whether this execution aligns with where the company needs to grow.
Yeah. And maybe just one little add on the end there is that it's got to be two-way. It can't just be a broadcast strategy across an organization. There have to be mechanisms for talking together because the best ideas that we have in the organization may not, in fact, probably won't come from the top. So we're going to close there because we are aware of your time, Sona, and everybody else's. Thank you so much for all the wisdom, and thanks to all of you for joining live and those who are joining to listen again. And please feel free to connect with Sona or I afterwards if this is interesting to continue into a deeper conversation. We've all got to continue to learn together, and when we do it human to human, it's much, much more effective and much more energizing, isn't it? So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.